Hello and welcome to the People's Politics first interview leading up to the election this May. We are joined here by Cambridge MP, LibDem, Dr. Julian Huppert. Welcome, Julian.
Hi Sam, how are you?
Okay, I'm good, thank you. Right, first of all, could you tell us a bit about yourself? So, what got you into politics? What do you stand for?
First I think one thing that's important is I grew up here in Cambridge, and it's becoming incredibly rare now for politicians to actually represent the place that they're from. So I grew up here, went to school and university here, worked here, and had the great pleasure of representing it. And actually I think that local feature, that sort of caring about a city, not just about national politics, is a really important thing. But for me, the thing that really got me into politics, I guess, was an interest in international human rights originally. So when I was younger, I was looking at things like the work that UNHCR do, looking after refugees around the world. And I got involved with a programme called Model United Nations, where schools or college students do simulations of the work of the UN. So that was my first interest, and then I got more interested in domestic politics.
Okay.
And became, I always knew I was on the left of politics. I grew up under Thatcher and knew I was on the other side to her. But I then realised that it wasn't just left-right, and that I was a liberal, that I wanted to empower people, I didn't want to force them to do things. So that got me active as a Lib Dem, and so the things I sort of care about in particular are things about civil liberties, things about internationalism, caring about the rest of the world, things about the environment, a real passion of mine, but also a deep commitment to social justice, which is something I've been pushing through everything that I do.
Okay, thank you. I think first of all we'll attack the elephant in the room. So I think it's fair to say you were elected on a mostly student vote. Would you think that's fair to say?
No, actually, I don't think that's right.
Yeah,
I won across Cambridge. I mean, certainly students were very supportive.
Yeah, well, I was just saying
but not. It wasn't just based on a student.
No, but it was a student vote for Lib Dem nationally. Then was still a big thing. So after the tuition fee promise break, then I don't really want to know like the whole thing about coalition. We've heard that all before. But how do you feel people can trust you and the Lib Dems nationally, kind of thing? What do you think you have to? How do you have to interact with them, engage with them to show you that this isn't going to happen again, or explain it better?
Well, I think firstly it's important to say I did actually do what I said I would do. I'm very proud of the fact that I had said I would vote against an increase in fees and that I'd propose a fairer alternative. And I did vote against an increase in fees, and I proposed an amendment that would have scrapped fees altogether over a period of a number of years. And it's a great shame that I didn't win. Yeah. But I stuck to my pledge. And actually that's particularly important because in Cambridge used to have a Labour MP. And when I was a student, she was re-elected, promising no tuition fees here. Labour promised not to introduce fees, and then they introduced them. And I remember being very involved with the campaigns against that. They then said, well, we'd never increase them, we'd never triple them. And then Labour broke their promise again and tripled them again, and I was involved. And again, Labour's MP here in Cambridge broke her promise to students again. So actually, firstly, I'm quite proud of the fact that I am the first MP for Cambridge ever to actually stick to my pledge and vote against a fee increase. So in terms of students here in Cambridge, if they want somebody who did what they said and will continue to do what they say, they should be supporting me. I know the Labour Party want to hope people will forget about their role in fees, but the facts are that Labour not only increased them and tripled them, they've been quite clear that had they won the last election, they'd have increased fees as well. I'd like to see them scrapped. I don't know where the money would come from for that. We're close to a graduate tax, which I think is probably the right way to go. One of the other things I've managed to do, though, is to get money to help with postgraduate study, because actually, to my surprise, the fee system we have now has encouraged more people to go to university, and particularly people from poorer backgrounds. Partly because, of course, you don't pay anything up front, partly because there's lots more bursaries for people from poorer backgrounds, but also because students who graduate under the new scheme pay back less per year than under Labour's scheme, because the threshold was lifted from 15,000
to 21,000. Yeah, but it's still
so they pay for longer. You pay for longer,
so
but you pay less. And what we're actually seeing is people are going to university more. But there's a big barrier at postgraduate because people finish their undergraduate study, they haven't had to pay anything, and suddenly they have to pay the fees to do a master's. And that can be 10,000 or more, and that's normally cash up front. So I've worked really hard. We've now set up the first loan schemes so you can get a better deal for graduates. If I had some money, I would start off, by the way, not by reducing fees by a bit, because that only helps students who go into a lot of money, but by providing bursaries, because actually students tell me that the real problems they have, it's not when they're graduating. It's not if they're earning 20,000, so they don't pay anything back. If they're earning 30,000, they pay a bit back, but they're earning 30 grand. It's when they're students. I would put more money towards bursaries.
Okay, fair So we know that obviously the promise had to be broken because you were in a coalition. Do you have any personal, not attachments, but more that you would feel more? Would you go into another coalition with the Conservatives? Would you feel that be pleased to do that, or would you think that you would rather go with Labour this time?
I'd rather have a LibDem majority government.
I know,
and the problem is, but it's quite a serious point,
yeah.
because what I would like to see is the ideas that we've been generating, which I think are genuinely better for everybody. They're much, much fairer. They deal with the economy sensibly without cutting as much as the Tories or being as reckless as Labour. That can only happen with a Lib Dem majority government. We can do all of what we want to do. So my aim, whether we're in government or not, whatever the outcome, would be to try to get as much of that done as possible. I don't really want to work with the Tories. I don't really want to work with Labour.
Yeah,
we'll have to see what the electorate say. Last time, there was no option. Us plus Labour didn't make enough. Labour were very clear they wanted to be in opposition. And so they weren't really negotiating seriously. And actually their demands were things like identity cards, tuition fee increase, third runway at Heathrow, a whole lot of stuff. They didn't want to be there. So the options were work with the Tories, get some of our things, stop some of their bad things, or let them do it on their own. I'd be able to say, it was much purer, I didn't have to work with those people, but the country would be a wreck.
Fair enough. Do you have then? Can I talk about do you have any personal red lines, ones that you won't go any further? I mean, mainly I'm talking about Trident here. So, what are your views on renewing the nuclear weapon system, or are you for full scrapping, or are you just not for replacing a new?
I completely scrap Trident if it was up to me. I don't think we need it. I don't think we want to have it.
Do you not see a threat from Russia recently? Or do you not see that
absolutely I see a threat from Russia, but I don't think that us having the ability to blow Moscow up is likely to be a very, very effective thing, partly because we know what the consequences were if we were ever to do that. But one of the key things is there's also threats elsewhere in the world, and I think our moral authority is really weak to say to other countries, you shouldn't have nuclear weapons, but it's fine for us to. We should be able to go around always with nuclear weapons ready, primed and able to go and blow people up any time. And that's what we've been doing for years. But you, Iran, you, wherever, you're not safe enough to be able to do that. So I would scrap it completely and utterly. That would also save us about £100 billion over the lifetime of the replacement. And I would spend that money, there's lots of things you could spend that money on: housing, better education, better schools, paying off debt. £100 billion could be much better spent. You could also spend it on better conventional forces, or special forces, whatever it might be, and that would be a more effective way of dealing with Russia.
You would spend still money on defence?
On a whole range of things. You spend some of it on defence to much greater purpose. We've had Trident submarines sailing the Earth to no effect at all. We could do much more, whether it's with aid, whether with more energy independence, we're not as reliant on Russia. There's much, much more that we could do with that. Now, part of the problem is the Tories are absolutely wedded to Trident, and Labour are absolutely wedded to Trident, and both of them have been absolutely adamant that they want it. So we've done really well to stop that replacement from happening. But the next Parliament will have to decide. I would love to see one of those two big parties change their minds, because if they stay absolutely fixed, we're not going to win. If we can stop them, or at least get them to step down the nuclear ladder from we are able to blow people up at any time on a moment's notice, to step down the ladder to, all right, maybe we'll keep some nuclear weapons for now, I hope we'll get rid of them, but if we could compromise on getting rid of most of them and not having them ready to blow people up, that would be a huge step towards getting off the ladder completely.
Okay, thank you. Right, we had the statistic from Oxfam about inequality earlier this year, so I want to know, what is your view on the current gap between the richest and poorest in modern Britain?
It's far too large. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. It is far too large. And depending how you look at it, the gap has been closing, if you look at some measures, increasing if you look at others. What is a great shame, and one of the frustrations I had with the Labour Party actually, is from 1997 to 2010, the gap got much bigger.
Yeah, I've got here the Gini coefficient says inequality has risen 43% since 1977. So
but it was a huge increase under Labour. They actually made this country less equal and increased unemployment, which clearly is a bit of a failure. I want to try to bring that down. So that's why we've done some really strong measures in government. So, for example, lifting poorly paid people up out of income tax. I find it astonishing. In 2010, if you're earning 10 grand a year, you had to pay £700 in income tax. To me, if you've got 10 grand a year, you need that cash. It's not easy. I'd like to move that to match the national minimum wage, about 12.5k a year, because it seems to me that it's a national minimum. The idea that says we give you a minimum and then we'd like to grab some of it back again seems wrong. On the other hand, we've increased the taxes for the very, very wealthy, mostly by closing loads of loopholes. And one of the big problems from the last government is they just left all these loopholes because they cared about the headline but not the rest of it. So a banker, rather famously, if they arranged to be paid through dividends, paid a lower tax rate than their cleaner did. Well, that's ridiculous. I want progressive taxes. That means more wealth taxation, so the mansion tax that we've been arguing about, that Labour voted against, now apparently they support it, great. We need to collect more money from people who are high earners and who are wealthy, and less from people who have less to start with.
Okay, you talk about, there's a big problem also, I think it was last year's statistic, that the most people in poverty are actually working. So I'm guessing that's on a minimum wage issue, so what is your increase on minimum wage or to a living wage? Do you see that as a plausible and a thing that we have to fight for?
So firstly, increasing the threshold for income tax makes a big difference to people who are the in-work poor, because it does mean they get to keep a whole lot of extra cash. The next step is to increase the national minimum wage, and I think we should be pushing ahead with increases as fast as we can without causing mass unemployment. So, the Low Pay Commission should be pressed to increase as fast as possible. Obviously, if you went too far, then you would actually find job losses, and that's an even worse outcome. So, yes, we should definitely be increasing it, particularly for young people and apprenticeships, because the national minimum wages there are far, far too low. So that would be a big focus for me. I'm also a huge champion of the living wage. I pay it to all of my staff. When we ran Cambridge City Council, we arranged for the council to pay all of its staff the living wage. We're currently arguing that all the people who work for organisations hired by the council, so the other organisation, should get it as well. Labour are resisting that for reasons I don't fully understand. Okay. But we should be having a good living wage, and we should be working to encourage everybody to pay the living wage. So I've been pressing the university and colleges in Cambridge and lots of the other companies to pay the living wage. I'd very much like, and I'd like to try and get a law in, that all the central government agencies, things that we have direct control over, they should all be paying a living wage as well.
Okay, thank you. I've got here a LibDem leaflet here. I think you also fought on this issue in 2010. What progress have you made in bringing more mental health funding to Cambridge?
So mental health has been ignored for 30 years, or probably since the NHS was set up, and it's a great shame. And we see it in the stigmatisation, that people are still sadly too ashamed sometimes to admit mental health problems. They're not treated well at work or at school. We need to change that. Within the NHS, there hasn't been support for it. For example, when Labour quite reasonably brought in targets for waiting times, so if you're going to have a hip operation, you could only wait a certain number of weeks, they ignored mental health. Mental health was never given any of that support. And as a result, more and more money was taken away. So I've been pressing to try to help out, and we've got some more money. So there's, I think, 1.5 million in this current year, extra coming in, 2.2 million next year.
Specifically in Cambridge.
For IAP, so psychological therapies. Nationally, we've got a lot more money in for £150 million for eating disorders in young people, because that's a huge problem.
You say about nationally, but the children's mental health services were cut by £50 million over this Parliament. So you're not winning the battle.
Well, actually, nationally, 150 million extra is substantial new money.
Yeah, but so in children's on 50 million. Yeah.
So that's a net increase of 100 million. But we need to go a lot further. So I want to see an extra £500 million basically immediately into mental health, because it is a crisis. And that's about child and adolescent mental health, that's about mental health throughout the spectrum. That would make a huge difference. Here in Cambridgeshire we have a particular problem, which is that we're one of the lowest funded areas in the whole country for healthcare. So we get a very small amount of money, a lot less than West Norfolk, for example. We then have historic problems. So Labour set up very big PFI schemes in Peterborough and Hinchinbrook, which suck a huge amount of that money out. The money that's left gets allocated reasonably fairly, same as the rest of the country at least, between physical and mental health. But you start off with too little money, you end up with too little. We're getting an extra £20 million for health from the 1st of April. A good chunk of that will go on mental health, and that will help. But there is so much more that we need. So I'd like to see £500 million per year immediately added.
Where is that money coming from, do you think?
So
where would you see that?
It's part of a whole package for the NHS. So Simon Stevens, who's the Chief Executive of NHS England, has said that by 2020 we have to get an extra £8 billion into the NHS. We, as a party, have said, OK, that is our task. That's the essay we've been set, if you like. Yeah. How do we find £8 billion? So we've gone through getting rid of various tax schemes, so reducing benefit people get if they, a lot of people who save on pensions, getting rid of a few of the other allowances that there are. And overall that finds over that period the £8 billion, starting with £1 billion immediately that is available from whenever we're in a new parliament. We'd have done it already if the Tories hadn't stopped it. Half of that, the initial £1 billion, would go straight into mental health because it is urgent. We've also been doing a lot of other things with the Crisis Care Concordat, which means that the police now work much better with mental health. That's beginning to make a big difference. We're trying to stop people who have mental health crises being held in in police cells, because actually it is a health issue. And that we need a complete change in how mental health is considered. There was a brilliant video that I'd urge you to have a look at from Frank Bruno, where he talked about his experience having a mental health crisis. He said that when he had a problem, 3 police cars showed up at his house. And the stigma, the effect that had on his neighbours, we have to change that. If somebody has a mental health problem, it's a health problem. They need to get the treatment.
Fair enough. Right, this is a question from Twitter. It says, at the start of the term you talked about a Cambridge to Oxford train link.
Yep.
What went wrong?
I mean, I think nothing's gone wrong at all. We're making progress for the first time ever since it was closed down. So the western half of it, which goes from Oxford as far out as Bedford, is being built in the current programme for train works. And that's really good. The work has also started, I've managed to get Network Rail to put the money in to design the detailed route, because lots of where it used to be has been built over now, so we can't just reopen it magically. And that work is happening now, and I really think that in the next 5-year cycle for trains, so they're done in these 5-year lumps, but I think in the next one we'll be able to get that East-West Rail line built, and that'll be really exciting.
So when do you think the actual direct train link will be built by?
So the works would be 2019 to 2024. That's what it sounds like a long way off, but it's been a long time waiting. As I say, it will be really big work. When it happens, it'll be brilliant because it will relieve congestion on, for example, the Cambridge-London trains, because you won't have to go into London in order to get back out again. It'll collect Norwich and Ipswich all the way through Cambridge, Bedford, Milton Keynes, Oxford, out to Bristol with the West Coast Main Line, the Midland Main Line. A really, really key scheme. I'm really committed to it. I'm actually the vice chair of the parliamentary group that's been working on it. Nick Clegg has spoken out in favour. I think it should happen.
I mean, you talked about at the moment you've got to go through London to Oxford. I mean, I think it's fair to say for all those commuters that the actual service there has actually got worse. So, what is there any short-term measures? Because obviously you said it will be about 2024 until it comes in. What short-term measures can you put forward to prevent decline? Well,
so there is a problem. I mean, the Cambridge King's Cross trains are some of the most crowded trains in the country. So a sign in some ways of Cambridge's success, but it is a problem. So we're extending more 12-car carriages, and I think that will help. I think the other thing is to try to get more services. So the new franchise, which includes Thameslink, will mean more trains between Cambridge and London, including trains that will go all the way through to Gatwick and all the way through to Brighton. I think that will help quite a lot. So we should have more trains per hour doing that route. So longer trains and more of them. And then the other missing gap is improving the Liverpool Street service, because currently it's very slow. I've been in Cambridge long enough that I remember when the Liverpool Street line was the good one, because you had to change trains at Royston for King's Cross. But we need to improve that Liverpool Street line so that you can do it much faster than it currently is. It's just too slow at the moment to get into Liverpool Street.
Okay, next one is from Facebook. How will you provide more affordable childcare for working parents?
This is a really, really important issue, because a lot of people do struggle when they have children, and sadly it's too often the women who find it hard. I mean, we have to try and break that down. I'd like to see shared parental leave so that more fathers do their fair share of childcare. But we've already done quite a lot, extending 3- and 4-year-old childcare.
I know you've done a lot, but this for like professional childcare. I mean, it's gone up by part-time nursery placements for children under 2 has gone up by a third. Full-time up from £9,000 to £11,000. This is just in the past 5 years, and childminders from £82 to £104 a week. I mean, it's on the rise and quite rapidly, faster than inflation. So what can be done for professional childcare? Yeah.
Well, so firstly, we have introduced free 3- and 4-year-old childcare for a number of people, and free 2s for people from poorer backgrounds. And so that makes a big difference. And if you're not paying for it, you don't have to worry about those hours. And I've been round to many of the places where that's done in Cambridge. It seems to be going really well. But we need more, so I'd like to expand that everywhere else, and also expand from 9 months to 2 years, so we start giving free support for many people in that area. Then we're already setting up, and it's already coming in, tax-free childcare, so credits for people to try to deal with that cost. Because childcare, unfortunately, is expensive. One solution, which is what the Tories wanted to do, was to have fewer staff looking after the children. I don't think that's the right way to go, because that means you'll get less good educational outcomes for the children. But so by a combination of tax-free childcare targeted at people who are working, free childcare targeted at people who don't have the income, I think that will start to make a really big difference. And then add on to that shared parental leave, so it's not just the mother who has to put in the work. And I think we'll see a much better improvements.
Okay. I mean, here at the People's Politics, we try and engage people of all ages, of all backgrounds, into politics. The young, in particular, are normally accused of being very apathetic. So what policies would you introduce, would you and the Lib Dems introduce, to get more young people involved in politics?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big problem with young people not voting. I mean, Russell Brand, has a lot to answer for with trying to encourage people not to.
But do you not think it's the politicians' fault that people aren't voting? I don't think it's. I think Russell Brand has convinced anyone not to vote. I think it's more.
I think he's been quite dangerous, actually. But yes, you're right. We need to do a much better job. So, there's lots of things that I would think young people ought to care about. So, one thing is just allowing more young people to vote. So, votes at 16, something I've championed for a very long time. There are 16-year-olds who are quite capable of voting sensibly. We should let them. It works fine. Then there's some financial things. So, things like discounts on using buses for young people, something which we're going to be pushing for this election, that you get 2/3 off for 16 to 21-year-olds on any bus. And actually that's something which will make a big difference for people trying to get to college, trying to get to work, trying to get to uni. I think there are other issues that young people do care about, like housing. They want to know that there will be somewhere affordable to be able to get to. I've put legislation forward to try to protect people in the private rented sector. There's issues like drug policy reform, where I think young people quite correctly spot that it's ridiculous that you can get many, many years in jail for having a spliff. It just doesn't make sense. So let's stop locking people up for those sorts of issues. I think young people care about the environment, because actually they know that it's a serious thing, so they care about those things. So I think we have to go out and talk. Which is one reason why I do things like this.
Get the policies. But what kind of? There's been a lot of calls say votes at 16. But do you think then there should be compulsory education of politics from the start? Because a lot of people at 16, 18, a lot of the reason they don't vote is just they don't understand how it will. Obviously, there's more policies that will affect them, and that makes it clearer. But if they're not taught about the system, about the different systems, about how parties work, how voting works, if they're not taught about that, do you think then that you're kind of just creating more apathy? If you're not really engaging them from an early age, would you see compulsory education of politics in schools as a option?
Yeah, I think it should be there. Citizenship should be there. Not necessarily a full politics A level. That might be a bit much. Some people love it, but yes, there should be that awareness. I think it's a great opportunity to get people to know what's going on. Part of it is also, I think, we as politicians have to make sure that we are more approachable, that we seem more human, that we talk about things that people really care about. And frankly, if we could cut back on some of the silly bickering that happens at things like Prime Minister's questions, I don't think that shows politics in a good light. We also have an issue with the media who sort of want it to be a two-sided row. And actually, I think most young people understand things are more complex than that and don't like the sort of very oversimplified picture they're often given.
Okay, thank you. Tax avoidance has come up a lot recently in news, so I want to know what concrete steps should we take in clamping down on tax avoidance?
So firstly, tax evasion is illegal. Yeah. We need to be really firm about prosecuting people who engage in it, and it's not something we should just turn a blind eye to. We have actually got, for the first time, a new unit in HMRC looking at tax evasion, really focusing on that. Tax avoidance, of course, some of it is a perfectly sensible thing to do if you put money into an ISA.
Yeah, I think it's clear. Yeah, we're talking about against the spirit. Yeah, so ISAs are government. It's not against the spirit of the law because it's a government promise.
And so that's the key thing: is if you are doing something for the purpose it was intended for, an ISA is there to encourage you to save. Fine. Otherwise, if you're abusing the system, then it should not be okay. So we've introduced a general anti-abuse rule because what used to happen is there were whole lots of loopholes. We've closed a good chunk of them, but there's still more. And it used to be that if you could find a clever loophole, you could save a lot of money. So we've come up with a new thing, which says if what you're doing is an abuse of the system, then it doesn't count. Whatever. So rather than us constantly having to plug all the loopholes, it's like, if you found this clever loophole, it's clearly a dodge, it doesn't count. So I think that's one of the things which we'd like to do. I'd like to go further with having a general anti-avoidance rule, which would mean it doesn't just have to be abusive, but anything where you're using it for the purpose so far from what it was intended, so that people actually pay the fair share. Because it's not right that big companies, rich individuals, manage to pay so much lower rates. So that's really important. So we would have a tax dodging bill in the next Parliament, and I'd be very, very keen to do, which would tighten up that, make sure we apply the sanctions properly, but also make sure that we have a simple enough and clear enough system so that the rules are clear to everybody and nobody can say, well, it was just so complicated I thought I could get away with this. Because it really, quite rightly, annoys people who are paying the right amount of money to see other people getting away with that.
Do you think that, I mean, this is a quote from the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee, who said they, meaning the big four accountancy firms, use their expertise to tell their clients, so the rich people who can afford these accountants, how to get around legislation that they help draft. So would you see it as a thing of to get rid of these big accountancy firms actually helping draft the bills that they then help their clients get around, or do you think it's a necessary thing to have them there?
I think listening to their expertise is very useful. I think I have no problem with that. They can be far too involved. I think the largest donor other than the trade unions, the Labour Party, was PwC, which I think says a lot about how they're going about doing it. So I think we need to break away from that. That is too close. Asking accountants for advice is one thing. Bringing them right on the inside to do it is too much. But it's also, we have this incredibly complex tax system. And that's the big problem, is that only those people in those very specialists can really understand it. We need a system which makes more sense. And if we had this general anti-avoidance rule, then it would mean they couldn't put in a loophole and then find it, because they'd be caught by the same rule. So that has to be where we go, so that accountants can have a perfectly good role in helping people with their accounts, coming up with interesting ideas, new business models, whatever it might be. But we need to cut down on that space where they can earn a huge amount of money by helping people fiddle with their taxes. Okay.
Near final question. As part of the Home Affairs Committee, so you've been on that since 2010, I believe, you've been looking into the child abuse inquiry, okay, so Rotherham scandal, etc. Are you aware, though, of the chair, Keith Faz's, conflicting interests involved with the inquiry?
I've seen a couple of tweets about it. I don't know the details.
Okay, but I just think
Keith would be expected to declare that as an interest. But I think, the scandal has been absolutely horrific, and I have to say, sitting through the sessions, both in public and in private, hearing some of the things that have happened, hearing how in Rotherham the police just completely let people down, the council just let people down. We've seen it in lots of other places. The thing that really worries me, actually, is that so far we've only seen a few very, very small bits of what's going to happen, and we are going to uncover far more problems. I don't think it was just Rotherham. I don't even know that Rotherham would have been the worst place for things to happen.
Well, yeah, we have here, it's just some of his, I want to know if you, how long you've known about these and whether you really think he should. No one, I think, is accusing him of a whole cover-up. They just feel that, especially after him grilling Fiona Wolf, it would be a bit hypocritical if he didn't make a public statement just clearing up everything that he's part of. He's past employment with Richmond Council, who are accused or alleged that they supply boys to the Elm Guest House in Richmond. He's also had past employment with Islington Council, who were involved in a cover-up. And he also in 1991 tried to change the... he spoke out, he got a Hansard report how he spoke out in Parliament about trying to change the law around an MP who was involved in a child abuse scandal. So do you think that these might have... I don't think anyone's accusing him of really of a huge conspiracy or anything, but do you think it should be, as chair, being independent, etc., should just clear it up and make a public statement and just saying these things, I was, but I don't know anything about this, just clearing it up, really?
I think he's declared the fact that he used to work for local government in these areas, and I think that's a matter for him.
Do you think? Okay, yeah. All right. Finally, then, what would a vote for the Lib Dems mean?
It would mean a vote for a person who's fought for Cambridge, for the values of people in Cambridge, and for a party that's fought for liberalism, for empowering people, for giving people a chance. So the Tories, at heart, are a party that says, if you make things easy for people, some people do well, and the others, well, that's their problem. And so we see that with their proposals, for example, take under 25s and say they're not allowed to have any housing benefit, which just means that if you struggle at 23, they'll just throw you out on the scrap heap. Labour have, sadly, a poor track record. They had a huge opportunity in 1997 to 2010, but actually made the country more unequal. They created loopholes so the rich didn't have to pay very much. They increased unemployment, and they sold off social and council housing. They caused the problems that we have now, and they simply don't realise that if you just promise to spend and spend and spend, that won't fix it. It'll just create more problems for our children. So those two parties simply don't work. But they also miss out on the thing that matters. So we are a party that cares about individuals, that say that what you want to do is different from what you want to do. And that's great. So we should provide the educational opportunities that are for you or for you, whether that's apprenticeships, whether that's university, whatever that is. We want to free you from conformity, which is why we've pushed ahead with things like same-sex marriage, because we value people. There's no way Labour or the Tories would have gone ahead with that either. So if what you want is a liberal voice that will care about freedoms, about empowering people, giving you the chance in your life, giving you an education that really counts, that is an internationalist party, will stand firm against xenophobia we're increasingly hearing. If you want a party that really cares about social justice to give everybody that chance, then it's really worth voting Lib Dem.
Okay, thank you, Julian. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Right, this has been the People's Politics first interview with Lib Dem MP for Cambridge, Julian Huppert. Thank you for joining us and keep spreading the word.